There comes a moment in every human being's life that cannot be avoided. A moment when all the masks fall, when all the lies you've told yourself begin to crack, when the weight of existence becomes unbearable. The ancients called this catharsis. Jung called it confrontation with the shadow. Nietzsche called it the abyss that stares back at you. But everyone agreed on one thing. It's at the limit that you discover who you really are. Nietzsche wrote, "You need to have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." He understood something that modern society desperately tries to hide. Suffering is not a flaw in the system. It is a fundamental characteristic of human existence. We live in a culture that teaches us to avoid pain at all costs. Antidepressants, endless distractions, superficial self-help, social media that promises instant validation. Everything designed to keep us comfortably numb. But the limit doesn't care about your escape strategies. The breaking point is reached when you least expect it. When the relationship ends, when you lose your job, when the social mask you've worn for years simply doesn't work anymore. When you wake up at 3 a.m. and realize you're living someone else's life. This video is not for those who are doing well. It's not for those who still believe they can control everything. It's not for those who are still asleep. This video is for you if you're at your breaking point. For you if you feel something fundamental needs to change, but you don't know what. For you if you're tired of pretending. Over the next few minutes, we will delve into the philosophy of great thinkers who understood limits not as tragedy, but as portal. Let's decipher the hidden laws of human transformation, and we'll give you a map to cross the abyss without getting lost. Because the truth is this, you didn't find this video by chance. The limit brought you here.
The limit is the call you ignored. The first truth about the limit is brutal. You didn't get here suddenly. You got here because you ignored hundreds of smaller signs, because you stifled your intuition, because you chose comfort over truth. Carl Jung had a devastating concept for this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Why do limits exist? Why does human nature include this capacity to suffer so intensely? Jung discovered something revolutionary. The human psyche has self-correcting mechanisms. When you live in profound misalignment with who you truly are, when you repeatedly betray your own essence, the psyche creates a crisis. It's not punishment, it's communication. Your subconscious is trying to communicate with you in the only way left, through pain. The limit is not your enemy. It's the messenger you've spent years refusing to answer. In Greek mythology, there is the story of Icarus, but not in the way they told you in school. Icarus didn't fall simply because he flew too close to the sun. The real tragedy was ignoring Daedalus, his father, who warned him repeatedly. Each time Daedalus spoke, Icarus was so intoxicated by the sensation of flying that he couldn't hear. The sun didn't appear out of nowhere. Icarus chose not to see what was coming. The same thing happens to us. Your body warned you with that tightness in your chest. Your dreams warned you with those recurring nightmares. That feeling of emptiness every Monday. That person you avoid looking at in the mirror. You knew. You always knew. Think of someone you know who had a nervous breakdown, burnout, a sudden divorce, an existential crisis at 40. From the outside, it seems sudden. But when you talk to the person, you discover there were signs for years. Small betrayals against themselves, small compromises that seemed harmless. It'll just be until I save up some money. It'll just be until the kids grow up. It'll just be until I get the promotion. Lies you tell yourself to postpone the inevitable.
Tactic 1. The brutal inventory. Grab a piece of paper. Write down all the areas of your life where you're lying to yourself. Not to others, to yourself. Where are you pretending everything is okay? Where are you betraying your own values? What truth have you been avoiding for months or years? Don't edit. Don't soften it. Just write. Tactic 2. The deadly question. Nietzsche proposed a devastating philosophical test. If you had to live this life exactly as it is, repeatedly, forever, would you accept it? If the answer is no, you have your answer. The limit isn't the problem. The life you've built is. Identity must die before you can be reborn. The reason why crossing the line is so painful isn't just what you're losing. It's who are you losing. The version of you that has built your current life needs to die. And we have a visceral fear of death, even symbolic death. Jung called this death of the ego. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Every real transformation requires a version of yourself to be sacrificed. Why? Because identity isn't who you are. It's a construct, a story you've told yourself for so long that you've forgotten it's fiction. You are not your job. You are not your achievements. You are not your social status. You are not even your thoughts. But you've invested so much in that identity that the idea of letting it go feels literally like dying. Schopenhauer understood this profoundly. A man can do what he wants, but he cannot want what he wants. Our will is trapped under layers and layers of social conditioning, trauma, and expectations. The limit forces you to dismantle all of that. In Buddhism, there is the story of the Buddha before he became the Buddha. He was Siddhartha, a prince protected from all suffering. But one day he saw 4 things: an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and an ascetic, and that shattered his reality. What's fascinating isn't what he saw, it's what did he do next. He abandoned everything: palace, family, identity, a secure future. He chose voluntary, symbolic death. And only after that death, only after years in the desert confronting his demons, did he find enlightenment. The transformation didn't come despite the loss, it came because of the loss. Do you know anyone who went through a devastating crisis and came out completely changed on the other side? Maybe even better? It wasn't the crisis that transformed them, it was what did they do with the crisis. Some people cross the line and rebuild themselves exactly as they were, only more frightened, more rigid, more defensive. Other people use limits as fuel for rebirth. They let die what needs to die, and they discover that there is something more real waiting on the other side. Tactic 1. The ritual of symbolic death. Write a farewell letter to the dying version of yourself. Thank them for everything they did. Acknowledge what they accomplished. And then, ritually, burn or bury the letter. Does it sound dramatic? It should. Real transformation is dramatic. Tactic 2. The empty space question. If I weren't blank, who would I be? If you weren't a successful professional, if you weren't the perfect parent, if you weren't strong, if you weren't funny, who are you when all the masks fall? Most people don't have the answer, and that's exactly why they're on the edge. The abyss stares back at you, and that's a good thing. Nietzsche wrote the most famous phrase about limits. When you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. But here's what nobody tells you. This is not a warning. It's a promise. The abyss is not just empty. It's where everything you've repressed, denied, hidden resides. It's where your shadow lives. Jung dedicated decades to studying what he called to shadow, everything about yourself that you don't accept, that you project onto others, that you hide even from yourself. Anger you never felt you could express. Desire you were taught to shame. Ambition you learned to disguise as humility. Power you were conditioned to fear. The shadow is not evil. It is non-integrated. And the limit forces you to finally look at her. Why? Because when everything falls apart, there's no more psychic energy left to maintain defenses. The doors of the unconscious open, and everything you've hidden comes to the surface. This scares most people, but the wise know that's exactly what you need. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche narrates the journey of a prophet who descends from the mountain to teach humanity. But before descending, he passed through 10 years alone, confronting their own demons. What Zarathustra found was not peace. It was chaos. It was madness. It was a dance between order and disorder. And it was only after integrating this chaos, only after dancing with the abyss, that he had something real to teach. Wisdom does not come from the light. It comes from traversing the conscious darkness. Think about the people you respect the most, those with real depth, with a presence you feel when they walk into a room. These people are not special because they avoided the abyss. They are special because they crossed it and returned. You can see it in their eyes, a quality that cannot be faked, an authenticity that only comes from having looked at your own inner monster and said, I see you, and you are part of me. Tactic 1. Dialogue with the shadow. Jung recommended a simple but unsettling technique, talking to your shadow as if it were a real person. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, and ask yourself, what do you want me to know? What are you trying to show me? What part of myself am I denying? And then, and this is crucial, listen. Don't judge, don't criticize, just listen. The answers will scare you because they're true. Tactic 2. The forbidden list. Write down everything you find offensive in others with disproportionate intensity. Every characteristic you detest, every behavior that disgusts you. Now comes the hard part. Ask yourself where these qualities exist within you. Where do you express them exactly, only in a disguised or repressed way? Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to understand ourselves. Your shadow is waiting for you to recognize it.
Meaningless suffering is unbearable, but suffering with purpose is transformative. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Auschwitz and founder of logotherapy, discovered something revolutionary in the concentration camps. It wasn't suffering that destroyed people. It was the lack of meaning. Those who survived were not the strongest physically. They were the ones who found a why to continue. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can endure almost any how." This is the difference between collapse and transformation. Narrative. Two people are going through the same crisis. One says, "Why is this happening to me? Life is unfair. I don't deserve this." The other one says, "What is this teaching me? What part of me needs to die? Who will I be on the other side?" The suffering is the same. The story you tell about suffering, it changes everything. In Greek myths, the hero Hercules had to complete 12 impossible labors, not because the gods loved him, but because he had committed a terrible crime in a state of madness. His suffering was real, but he had a choice, to be destroyed by it or to be reformed by him.
Each task was more brutal than the last. Killing the Hydra, capturing the boar, cleaning the Augean stables, descending into the underworld. In the end, Hercules was no longer the same person. He had become something beyond human, not despite the suffering, through of suffering. Every truly successful person, not the superficial Instagram success, but the success of integrity and purpose, has a story of breaking down. The businessman who went bankrupt before building his empire. The artist who spent years in obscurity before achieving recognition. The wise man who overcame deep depression before finding clarity. The difference isn't that they didn't suffer, it's that they transformed suffering into fuel. Tactic 1. The heroic reframing. Rewrite your crisis as the first chapter of a hero's journey. No, I'm at rock bottom and I don't know how to get out. Yes, I'm at the gateway to transformation. This is the trial that will forge me. It's not toxic positivity, it's recontextualization. Tactic 2. The legacy question. 10 years from now, when I look back on this moment, what story do I want to be able to tell? Do you mean you gave up? That you ran away? That you became bitter? Or do you mean, that's where everything changed? That's where I became who I truly am? You decide now. If you've made it this far, you've grasped the core idea. The limit isn't tragedy, it's revelation. But so far we've talked about understanding the limit. Now let's talk about crossing it. Because it's one thing to intellectually understand that suffering can be transformative. It's quite another to have the practical tools to avoid getting lost in the process. The following principles are more dangerous, more radical, more demanding. These are the laws for those who have decided that they will not only survive the limit, but to be reborn through him.
You need to choose your suffering. Here's a truth that nobody wants to hear. You're going to suffer either way. The question isn't how to avoid suffering. The question is, which suffering do you choose? The suffering of staying where you are, or the suffering of changing? Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism, understood this better than anyone. He wrote about it. The despair of not wanting to be oneself versus the desperation of wanting to be oneself. Both are painful, but one keeps you trapped, the other sets you free. You can suffer the pain of staying in a job that is slowly killing you, or you can suffer the pain of the uncertainty of leaving. You may suffer the pain of remaining in the dead relationship, or you may suffer the pain of the temporary loneliness of leaving. Which pain do you choose? Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, was exiled for 8 years to a desolate island. He lost everything, his position, his comfort, his family. He had 2 choices, to suffer as a victim or to suffer as a philosopher. He chose the second option. He used exile to write his most profound works, to refine his character, to become wise. When he finally returned to Rome, he was no longer the same person. He was better. Think of someone you know who is clearly unhappy but refuses to change. They complain constantly. They blame others. They say they will change soon. They are not avoiding suffering. They are choosing the suffering of stagnation over the suffering of change. Why? Because the suffering of family is less frightening than the suffering of strangers. But the cost is devastating. They never find out who they could have been. Tactic 1. The mathematics of suffering. Grab a pen and paper, divide it into 2 columns. Column 1, the suffering of staying. Column 2, the suffering of changing. Be brutally honest. List everything. Now answer this. What suffering in 5 years will you regret having chosen? Tactic 2. the 20-second rule of courage. Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. 20 seconds to send the message. 20 seconds to quit your job. 20 seconds to make the choice. Everything changes in 20 seconds of decisive action.
Loneliness is the laboratory of transformation. You cannot transform yourself amidst the crowd. You cannot be reborn surrounded by opinions, expectations, and judgments. True transformation requires solitude. Not the solitude you run from, the solitude you choose. Nietzsche spent years isolated in the Swiss mountains, ill and alone before writing his masterpieces. Jung had what he called confrontation with the unconscious, a period of near madness where he isolated himself to delve into his own depths. Why? Because you can't hear your own voice over the noise. Society doesn't want you to change. Your family, even though they love you, has a certain image of who you are. Your friends expect you to remain predictable. Loneliness breaks that spell. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert before beginning his ministry. Buddha spent years alone before enlightenment. Moses went to the desert before receiving the tablets. It's no coincidence. It is archetype. The desert, literal or metaphorical, is where the ego dies and the self emerges. Why do you think people are so afraid of being alone? Why do they need constant distraction, noise, people? Because in solitude, there's nowhere to run. You come to face with yourself. And for most people, that's terrifying. But what about you who were at your limit? That's exactly what you need. Tactic 1. The retreat of consciousness. Take at least 48 hours completely alone. No cell phone, no TV, no books, at least initially. Just you and your thoughts. In the first few minutes, you'll feel restless. After a few hours, you'll want to give up. But if you persevere, something incredible happens. You begin to hear your own voice. Tactic 2. Social fasting. For 1 week, don't talk to anyone about what you're going through. No venting, no advice, no external validation. Force yourself to process it internally. Find out what you truly think, not what others think you should think.
The limit is where you discover your true character. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold, adversity tests strong men." Anyone can be virtuous when they are comfortable. Anyone can be wise when there is no pressure. Anyone can be strong when there is no threat. Limits reveal who you truly are. The Stoics had a fascinating concept, amor fati, love for destiny. It was not passive resignation, it was active acceptance. It was a matter of saying, this is happening, and I'm going to use it. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in Meditations, "The obstacle is the path." He wasn't saying the obstacle will go away. He was saying that. The obstacle is exactly what you need to become who you're meant to be. Epictetus was born a slave. He was tortured, his leg was permanently broken. He had nothing, no freedom, no comfort, no secure future. And yet he became one of the greatest philosophers in history. How? Because he understood you don't control what happens to you. You only control how you respond. And his answer was to transform chains into wisdom.
When you look at the people you truly admire, what do they have in common? They were tested, brutally, and they didn't break. Not because they were naturally strong, but because they chose to use the test as a forge. You are being tested now. The question is not,
Why me? The question is, what will this test reveal about me? Tactic 1. The Stoic Oath. Every morning, before starting your day, say to yourself, "Today, I will face difficulties, and each one of them is an opportunity to prove my character. Not because I want to suffer, but because I choose to grow." Tactics 2. The Fire Diary. Every night, write, "What challenge did I face today? How did I respond? If I could relive that moment, would I act differently? What did this reveal about who I am?" You are documenting your transformation in real time.
On the other side of the boundary, you don't go back, you are reborn. The ultimate truth is the most radical. You can't cross that line and go back to being who you were. True transformation isn't an upgrade, it's a death and rebirth. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are instead of who you've been conditioned to be. But he was clear, this process is irreversible. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you integrate your shadow, you cannot return to innocence. Nietzsche had a perfect metaphor: metamorphosis in 3 stages. First, you are the camel, carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. Then you become the lion, not roaring, but destroying what is useless. Finally, you become the child, innocent but aware, free to create anew. You are transitioning from camel to lion, and there's no going back. In medieval alchemy, there was a process called blackness, decay, death, the complete decomposition of the material before it could be transmuted into gold. The alchemists knew you cannot transmute without first destroying. Gold is not found, it is created through fire, pressure, radical transformation. You are the material. The only limit is the fire.
Perhaps you're afraid of what comes next, afraid of losing people, afraid of not recognizing yourself, afraid of not being able to come back. Good. You should. Because the version of you on the other side isn't an improved you. It's a fundamentally different person, with different values, different limits, different tolerances for lies. Some people won't recognize you. Some will judge you. Some will abandon you. And that's okay. Because you will finally recognize yourself.
Tactic 1. The Future Card. Write a letter to yourself, to your future self who has already crossed the boundary. What would they say to you now? What advice would they give? What truths would they reveal? Write as if you've already been reborn, because you are about to. Tactic 2. The Commitment Ritual. Make a commitment to yourself, not to others, not to the universe, with himself. Say it out loud. I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to betray myself anymore. I'm not going to live someone else's life. I'm going to cross this line, whatever awaits me on the other side, and I will be reborn. So, act accordingly.
If you've made it this far, something within you recognized the truth in these words. You didn't find this video by chance. You're at your limit because it's time. Time to stop pretending. Time to stop running away. Time to look into the abyss and say, I see you, and I'm not afraid. Nietzsche, Jung, Seneca, Schopenhauer, they all pushed the boundaries. They all gazed into their own shadows. They all died symbolically before being reborn. And they left a map, Not because they wanted to spare you suffering, but because they wanted to show you that suffering has meaning. You can cross the line and destroy yourself, or you can cross the line and forge. The choice was always yours. The limit is not the end, it's the beginning. Now it's going to happen.